And welcome to another episode of All Politics is Local. I'm John Tian, your host. All Politics is Local is a production of the Greater Blackstone Valley Democrats. The Greater Blackstone Valley Dems is a registered political action committee representing the towns, all 14 towns in the Worcester, Norfolk Senate District. And tonight we're proud to have our state senator on the show, Senator Richard Moore. Senator, thank you for being on the show tonight.
I'm happy to be with you, John.
Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man, and it's great to have you here. Certainly, your constituents out here in the district are looking forward to hearing from you. We'll have the entire hour tonight to discuss everything that's going on and what the good news is out there.
All right.
So why don't we jump right in? We'll start off with a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I'm employed in the solar power industry. I'm very so anything renewable energy related is very important to me. Not only am I employed in the industry, but I'm also the chairperson of Milford's Renewable Energy Advisory Committee, where I've been able to do some really good work with the town of Milford to do some good stuff, both saving the taxpayers some money and getting us some renewably generated power here in Milford. On the renewable energy front, there's some issues going on right now with the net metering cap. It's being reached in several of the load zones. Is there any motion being taken on Beacon Hill to address that?
There is certainly concern, and I'm hopeful that there will be some action before the end of formal sessions, because it's to the degree we cap the ability of the communities to grow and use solar energy. We're hurting potential industrial development, certainly trying to keep rates reasonable for people, for the customers. So I hope we can get to that before the end of the session. I see increasingly solar power arrays around the area. There's one down from the end of my street on Hartford Avenue in Uxbridge, and I think within the last year we've seen solar farms in Upton and Milford, Northbridge, Uxbridge, Douglas, I think Sutton.
I think Bangmar's Dairy put one in, didn't they?
That's the one down the street from me.
Yep.
And I think there's another one just down the hill from them.
Okay.
On the other side, almost going close to the Sutton-Douglas line. But it's obviously one where the public, I think, and people are realizing it's economical. It helps, certainly reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, which I think the last time I heard the president speak on it, we're now not sending so much money out to countries that don't like us,
right.
as we were largely because of nuclear and some of the other solar, and because of some of the other power sources that we have. We're doing some additional in hydro. Geothermal, certainly. So
natural gas is huge right now. They're actually extracting a lot of natural gas. They're extracting a lot of oil in the United States these days too. We're actually producing more oil here than we're importing from overseas. One thing that's funny about the oil market, I mean, people like to have that simplistic approach to it. Like if we drill here, then we pay here, and it's so much better for us. Oil is actually traded on a world market, so the price of oil
doesn't make a lot of difference.
Right, doesn't make a lot of difference whether we extract it here or whether we import it from overseas. And at the same time, most of the oil that we import here in the United States actually comes from either Canada or Mexico. There's not so much importing from overseas. A lot of the overseas oil, the Middle Eastern oil, ends up in Japan, ends up in Europe, areas like that.
Yeah, but I think to the degree that we take it either from our own country or from our neighbors, and not be reliant on parts of the world that tend to be unstable.
Or tend to hate us.
Or tend to hate us, unfortunately. And we only, in some of those countries, we're only actually providing money for governments and private sector terrorists that would like to do us harm. So it's better that we not give them any money, and that hopefully we can make it harder for them to then do any harm to our citizens.
Exactly. So that's interesting, and I'm glad that that's at least on the radar for the Senate. I know Senator Ben Downing is in favor of raising the caps.
He's taken a leadership role there. He's chair of that committee on telecommunications and energy, and he's a very well-respected member of the Senate.
Yep. So Senator Ben Downing is at the forefront there, and we'll have to stay in touch with our constituents. If anybody out there is watching is concerned about things like the net metering caps, certainly get in touch with either your office or whichever state rep represents you. Of course, we have 4 different state reps across the district. So. All right, terrific. I was reading your website today in preparation for our visit tonight. I was reading your website and I was taking a look at a couple of things. One was your mid-session report, which I guess just came out recently.
Yes.
You talk about the Manufacturing Caucus. Can you explain to us a little bit what the Manufacturing Caucus is all about?
Actually, it's Representative John Fernandez from Milford and I are he's the House Chair and I'm the Senate Chair of this, and we have close to 60 members of the legislature have actually signed up to become members, and we've had a meeting already with the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, and really it's to recognize that manufacturing really is coming back, not the type that we had in the Blackstone Valley for many years, or in Milford. We don't have the shoe industry or the textile industry, although frankly actually textiles are coming back to the United States, although not as many jobs in them. Technology has made it economical for businesses to do that business here rather than to go overseas. But it's really it's advanced manufacturing. It's robotics and laser and fiber optics, things like that, that require a little extra skill. Then it's not so much dependent on numbers of people, but their intelligence and their willingness to pay attention to the technology needs that are of the workforce.
So here in Massachusetts, with our well-educated populace, we stand a natural.
We're in great shape. In fact, we're in demand, and because keeping our young people here is important. And
absolutely,
frankly, many of them are staying. But the jobs in that field they average about $75,000 a year. So they're not the typical piecework kind of boring jobs.
Sure, that's not inconsiderable, and if you're trying to live in Massachusetts, that's a good wage to be able to do it on. Yeah.
So we're certainly working to encourage that. We're looking at several things. One is the biggest need right now of any of these advanced manufacturing is workers, really, because even though it's not as job intensive as the old kinds of manufacturing, it does require skills that aren't always immediately available. And so we're working with community colleges and some of the other education folks, like Blackstone Valley Vocational School, for instance, which does a lot and has been in the forefront in robotics particularly.
Yep.
But we're working with them to try to help them expand the number of students that are trained and available. There are something like over 100,000 jobs posted in Massachusetts that aren't yet filled because we don't have people with that set of skills to go into it. So there's a job market there. Young people, and even more perhaps than the young people, their parents need to realize that manufacturing isn't the kind of grimy old mill sort of setup. Most of the places you'd think you're walking into a lab or a hospital because they're wearing lab coats, and it's
kind of a clean room with environment and that kind of thing.
And so it's a nicer work environment. It is better compensated for the employee than the old system, and so it's really understanding that. But John Fernandez and I went to Valley Tech a few weeks back to look at their 3D copier.
They have one of those 3D printers.
They have several of them.
Yep.
And the students are able to design something. And what they were doing was designing parts for the robots that they were creating for their competition. And then they can copy that, take the plans and run it through the printer, and it creates a 3D plastic model.
Sure.
And then they take the plastic model, and if it works, if it's the way they wanted it to, then they cast it in metal.
Okay.
And so they have build the robot.
Sure. So they get the prototype that way by plastic.
Exactly.
And then they cast it out of metal.
So that's really what I was involved in a company over in Oxford, the IGT Photonics, and they had come to me a number of years ago and needed a state tax credit, and they were promising to hire 100 people, new jobs created. They created over the last few years 700 jobs.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And they wanted to do another 150 and ultimately then 400 more. And in order to do that, they needed to build on the land they had available was current at the time their leach field. So they had to connect to a sewer.
Okay.
As it happened, the closest sewer was Webster, just down the road from where they were. It was under capacity because some of the mills in Webster had closed.
Yep.
So they were able to take on additional capacity. The pipes run by a section of Dudley, so Dudley could actually get some industrial property that would become more marketable.
Sure, by hooking up. Yeah.
And initially, the state agency responsible for that had turned them down. And I contacted the administration, worked very closely with then Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray to get the company a grant for the sewer construction of $2.1 million. And then we got them a tax credit for $1.8 million. They're in construction. They're in the process of recruiting and hiring the additional workers. They want to go beyond that. As soon as that's done, they're going to start another addition for 400 more employees. So it's an investment that does a couple things. One is it helps them create jobs, which they will, and they're good jobs. It makes the area, which has been harder hit by the recession, more attractive to other businesses.
Yep.
In fact, 2 other businesses that are already there will be able to connect into this sewer.
Sure.
And be able to expand themselves, plus
Yep.
some other property. So it's the kind of thing for a relatively, I mean, it's big money to us, but small money from the standpoint of the state budget or the federal budget, to invest in an area, in the infrastructure, the sewer line, that will help create jobs that'll be with us for a number of years. So.
Sure, for decades. That's wonderful. That's really a win-win situation, and I love to find those. Those are great. And I had no idea that this was going on. So,
well, and the other thing that, in fact, again, is Representative Fernandez and I have been involved with working with the Grafton and Upton Railroad to get that back in fuller operation, and they're complete from Grafton through to Route 60 in Hopedale. This spring and summer, they will finish the job connecting to Milford and into Bellingham Franklin, actually to the line that goes through there. John Della Pascoli, the president of the railroad, has been working closely with the state to look at the state's in the process of upgrading some rail in the west. They found a way that John can purchase from the state, from the MBTA, rail that's a higher grade than used to be on that line, that's able to then carry the CSX cars across so that they can free up more space on the main line for commuter rail between Worcester and Boston. And I think it's going to, the other key thing it does for the area is that there's a lot of land that the railroad has owned and some that others own there's along the railroad tracks that will now become prime marketable property for an industry, which will create jobs. I think it's the best thing that could happen to the former Draper facility in Hopedale.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because it'll now we're providing rail service for that facility, and as businesses develop currently there's a trucking company in the old foundry, they're actually looking to market that to another potential source of jobs and create another building just next door to it. But suppliers for some of these businesses are going to find, I think, that the old Draper plant is an ideal spot to create an industrial hub right there where there once was.
Where there once was an industrial hub,
and provide jobs for people in the area. And I think, even though we're starting to climb out of the recession, jobs is still a pretty high priority.
Exactly, jobs are still at a premium, and we have a lot of unemployed people who need them. So yeah, that's all wonderful.
Well, and jobs that pay well too.
And you look at the Blackstone Valley. You look at the history of the Blackstone Valley. This was the heart of America's Industrial Revolution.
Absolutely.
The first river-powered mill was built on the Blackstone River. How many years ago? 200 years more? 250 years ago? Somewhere around there? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's we've been a hub of industry. I actually found an old National Geographic from 1920 that talks about Massachusetts being the beehive of industry.
Sure. I think that was mentioned in your mid-session report, wasn't it?
And it's true, and we were. And then as industry went through the war, and that of course kept the industry going. But after the war, they started looking to cut their costs, and labor was a big cost, so they went south and then overseas.
Yep.
But now with technology, we can actually bring some of these industries, sometimes the same ones, but a lot of industry back that's actually cleaner, pays better.
Yep.
Doesn't require quite as many people, but requires people with a little skill set and some education.
Sure.
And that's what we're working on doing.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'm so glad that you and John are spearheadting that. That's absolutely one. You said there's 60 members of the legislature.
And a lot of interest too. And we've had some interest with, and we're one of our focuses. I actually have a bill to encourage more state purchasing and local purchasing from businesses not only made in America, but made in Massachusetts.
Made in
to the degree
Massachusetts,
that can be accomplished as long as the price isn't too dramatically different.
Right.
That we should be trying to use our public dollars to encourage private industry to hire our own people.
Sure.
Keep our people at work.
Well, that's one of the things, again, going back to renewable energy, one of the things that I love about our renewable energy program is part of the rebate money that's available if someone decides to purchase a solar power system. Some of that rebate money is earmarked for those people who will use components made in Massachusetts.
Right, and we have a growing industry in that area too for energy equipment, and so the more we can do of that, the better, because it's helping our neighbors and maybe ourselves sometimes.
There's actually more people nationwide employed in the solar power industry than there are in both coal and gas, I believe, combined. There's more people employed in the solar power industry, so it's really growing in leaps and bounds. It sure is. It's going. It's doing well. So getting back to your progress report, we have manufacturing caucus we talked about, college affordability. That was another bullet item in the report.
Well, we've actually I've hosted now a couple of seminars for parents and students, mostly parents, on some of the ways that they can help make it a little more affordable to help their son or daughter go to college. And we brought in some experts from the college financing, and we have a Massachusetts Education Authority that helps channel the scholarship money and grants and aids.
That's MIFA, right?
MIFA,
Massachusetts Educational Finance Administration.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they've come in, and we've had people from the financial community, and it's one the cost of college education still usually means people are going to earn more over their lifetime by having that, and it helps. I think it helps the community to have more folks go to some kind of education beyond high school, and we want to try to make it affordable. And it's some people it's getting out of reach because even if the tuition, as in the public colleges, is modest compared to the private colleges, room and board and the books and some of all the fees,
ancillary fees and
it really adds up. And so what we're looking for is trying to give advice and guidance to parents as to where to go that they can get the best deal and what to look for and what to be careful of with many of the colleges now because of changes in the federal educational financing laws. Most of the colleges now are taking on the role of banks, and they do it cheaper than most of the banks are able to do. And it's an area I know Senator Elizabeth Warren, our senior now U.S. Senator, has taken this on as a major priority for her efforts, looking at even that the federal government's even making, she thinks, too much money off the students.
In the financing. She wants to reduce the interest rate on
and I think that's an important goal to work toward because it's important for not only for the families and for the young people, but for them to get their education and then to be able to be more job ready. Just as we were talking a few moments ago about the needs for skilled workforce for manufacturing and for some of the other fields. If we can help people get that education and be able to then get the good job that follows, I think that's really part of what government ought to be doing to help out.
Yep, absolutely. Moving on, we can talk a little bit about welfare reform. That was yet another bullet in your mid-session report.
There's been actually a lot of what we're doing in the bill and legislation. It's in conference between the House and Senate right now. Both branches have passed a version. The current commissioner of public welfare, or actually transitional assistance we call it, came in and in the midst of what seemed to be some loose administration of the program, and has done, I think, a great job of really reducing the potential for fraud that had gone on there. And where the bill itself kind of incorporates some of the reforms that she has implemented administratively, so that we know the administration will be different in next year, whoever it is the governor. And we want to try to capture those reforms and keep them in place. What the whole theory and the vision of the state's welfare program is to help people lift them out of poverty, which is being on welfare, you're still pretty poor.
Yep.
But lift them out of poverty and get them into a job, or get them the skills needed to get into a job.
Sure.
That it should be a transitional time in someone's life
and not a way of
and
life.
not a way of life. And
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's what each of the changes are being made.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think bothered a lot of people, certainly bothered members of the legislature, was that we were getting reports that there were something like 21,000 welfare EBT cards, electronic benefit cards, that were lost every month. Well, that's a lot of cards to be lost.
Sure.
And there's been some evidence, and certainly was a strong suspicion, that some of those cards were being sold to people who weren't eligible.
Sure. So it was becoming a fraud issue rather than
and
I
so
lost my
and there
card
was a
issue.
need to get that. And so now, if someone loses their card, I think they're entitled to one free card replacement, and then they start having to pay for the replacement cost of the card.
Yep.
That ought to reduce to some degree some of that fraud. But it's really one of the things that I think some people get not always an accurate impression when they're in the supermarket line and someone in front of them is using their EBT card. And they might think, well, they're not entitled to that. Either they think they have more money than the card exhibits. Oftentimes they may not be here in this country legally. But if they had children here, the children are American citizens, even
Yep.
if the person
May or may not be. Yeah.
may or may not be. And it's not that person that's getting directly into it. I mean, I'm sure that we don't go into anybody's home to see
who's eating what. Yeah.
but it's the recipient of the benefit are the kids who are legal citizens. And one of the things that actually was reformed, not just in this last time, but several years ago, was that there was always the feeling that, well, if someone wants more welfare money, they just have to have another kid. But it doesn't, the number of kids does not make a difference. It does at the time you apply initially. Mm-hmm. And your benefits are estimated based on that. But if you have additional kids, you don't get additional money to go with it. And so that, while it might have been true in the past, is not, as far as we can determine, not true anymore.
Okay.
That they don't just have another kid to get more money, because you're going to have more kids with the same amount.
With the same amount of
basic.
benefit and
Exactly.
more mouths to feed with the same amount of benefit.
Yeah, so it should discourage the.
Yeah, it's
the
no longer
practice.
an inducement if it ever was.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right.
Excellent. Moving on to domestic violence, that was yet another bullet that I noticed in your mid-session report.
And we continue to look at ways to try to make that less common in society. It still is far too common that it occurs in homes, and so the penalties providing. I think actually I know Secretary Galvin's been very involved, and he's been on the media pretty regularly on one issue, and that is that oftentimes normally it's a woman that separates, but it sometimes is a guy, and the other spouse wants to continue to harass them or thinks that they want to punish them for whatever they did that caused the split. And he's established an address that can be used. It's a safe address. It's not the person's real home,
Yep.
but it's like a P.O. box sort of thing. But the state has that so that any correspondence can go through that, and then the individual decides whether they want to
receive it or
and that protects the spouse
Sure.
who's on the recipient end of the violence,
Mm-hmm.
basically,
Yeah.
from being discovered if they're in a shelter or in a safe home,
safe home or wherever they
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
And so that's and what we found, and it gets to another piece that we talked about in the annual report, that there are a lot of studies that show that people that abuse animals oftentimes graduate to abusing people.
Yep.
And so we've really strengthened and continue to strengthen the penalties for animal abuse
Okay.
as well. I was involved actually in a case that we had in Douglas a couple of years ago, where a dog that a family dog was missing, and that finally was found and clearly had been killed by someone. They'd put a bag over the dog's head, and the dog and it was restrained, and the dog had suffocated. And that led to, we then were able to file a bill to raise the penalty to make it a felony for seriously either killing or seriously injuring an animal. There's a case that's pending now in the Quincy area where a dog was so viciously treated that when the dog was found, it had to be
It had to be put down.
Put down because it just couldn't
Yeah.
survive the way it had been treated awfully. Unfortunately, they did find the individual who had committed those crimes, and they will be it'll be a felony charge.
They'll be dealt
against
with
them.
harshly as a result.
And there are so many cases where people graduate to the next level and abuse other people,
Sure.
whether family members or others. To the degree we can get at that and try to at least punish it early, so that they're not that those folks aren't out there abusing other people, other animals or people.
Sure.
I think is the direction that we as a society should be going, to do everything we can to discourage that kind of behavior.
Absolutely, yeah. So thank you for that. School safety is also high on your list, certainly in the aftermath of the shootings in Newtown, Connecticut.
And we've had there are a number of ideas. In fact, there's a commission that was appointed by the Speaker on the House side that has come out with a number of recommendations. Representative Hank Naughton from Clinton is one of the leaders of the effort in the House side, Jim Timilty in the Senate side. And one of the areas that we have probably one of the toughest, if not the toughest, gun registration laws in the country.
Yes.
And yet it still hasn't stopped people from acquiring guns illegally and using them, certainly illegally. And so adding more restrictions, I don't think is really the way to go. I mean, we can improve the background check and things of that nature, but it really seems we need to focus more on the mental health side of things, that we've, I think, too long as a society have kind of put it off, because dealing with the mental health side, it's slower and is more expensive than just slapping on another regulation on people who aren't the ones causing, for the most part, causing the problem.
Right.
I think if we focus more on that, I've been a long proponent for doing more in mental health, especially with adolescent mental health and young children, that if we can recognize and address mental health issues, particularly with people who are younger, it might, and I think will, reduce the likelihood that that anger is going to continue to build and build, and then they're going to strike out at somebody, as we've seen in some of the school violence cases.
Sure.
So there will be a major focus this session on adolescent mental health in general, but also mental health overall, to look at areas, how can we do better at spotting some of the signs, the warning signs that somebody might lash out in a violent method or hurt themselves, and sometimes these kids that do kill some other kids or teachers and ultimately kill themselves or get killed by law enforcement.
Right, or suicide by cop, I think they call that. So.
And it's a tragedy all around, and so if we can address it earlier, and it will take some resources, although I think it's a good investment for the state to expend some money and some time and make sure we have people that are trained to respond to this and help the schools to address that problem, so they don't have. I don't think there's any great interest in turning each school into some kind of fortress. Because they're reasonably secure now. I mean, Milford, when I visited Milford High School, you get a picture taken basically on a little pass.
You have to show your ID. I've been there. I go to see Superintendent Tremblay occasionally, and
And I think and every school has some kind of now you can't just walk in.
Right.
And I think that's prudent for a lot of reasons, not just for the school violence issue. But it's one that we need to address as a society.
Well, you bring up a good point. When you began the discussion, you talk about how Massachusetts has such a powerful gun registration system and some really powerful laws about gun ownership in this state. But the problem that, as I see it, is that because it's not national, it's so much easier for people to go out of state, purchase a weapon, and come back, or to go to a gun show even and purchase a weapon and come back into the state with a weapon. Things like some kind of a national law banning straw purchases. Straw purchases happen all the time. Guns show up on the streets from Georgia, from states down south where laws are more lax. Illinois has a real problem with it. Illinois has a fantastic gun control legislations or gun safety legislation, but yet guns show up all the time because there's really no penalty for people who make straw purchases.
Well, and unfortunately a problem beyond the bounds of the Beacon Hill.
Exactly. So it really speaks
So-
to the need for federal
So, yeah,
legislation.
so
and-
I mean, what we can do something to do the best we can within the borders of Massachusetts. But some of these other areas, and it's where a lot of the weapons are coming from. They're not. Occasionally, somebody is broken into and weapons are stolen, but it's generally coming because it's cheaper and
Sure.
less dangerous for the thief to get them out of state, because they can get them too readily in too many other states, including a few that are close to us. So.
Right. New Hampshire has much looser
Yeah.
gun safety legislation than Massachusetts does. So school safety is a big issue, obviously, especially in the wake of the Newtown massacre.
Well, and we've had kind of a relation. It's not really school violence issue, but school safety and school health. One of the bills that I was involved in last year that now is in force was to require every school to have a medical emergency response plan.
Okay.
That because we've had cases in this very area where a young person either they have an unknown congenital heart issue,
Yep.
or they're hurt in sports and the afibrillation occurs that the heart either speeds up or stops. And we had a case in Sutton where a young man was hit hard in football and his heart stopped, and they didn't have the
automated
AED,
electronic defibrillator.
exactly
Yep.
present. And so the first step was to get the response plans in place. Every school now has them, and they need to obviously from year to year review them and work with local law enforcement on them.
Yep.
But they've got that, and the other thing I was able to put in the budget, the current budget, a $250,000 account for a fund for matching grants for the AEDs, and that's within the next couple of weeks. The Executive Office of Public Safety will be announcing the grant program, and so school communities, nonprofit groups or others can help meet the local share of that and start making sure that some schools already have some, maybe they don't always have it in every school or
Right.
enough, and I think that will help to eliminate what tends to be a real tragedy.
Sure.
And it will also look at improving communication with the police. Again, back to the school violence issue. One of the things that we did in the bill that the Senate did was to make it a requirement that the schools and the local police and local fire folks, that they have access to the building plan so that they know they don't have to rush around and
Wondering where they're going to go.
Yeah, and you can get that, and now of course you can get it on electronically.
Sure.
Available so that it's easier to store and to call up the building that you need when there's an emergency. So I think
rather than have to flip through a file drawer looking for it or anything like that.
or go to an office that is locked because the building commission is out somewhere.
Right.
So I think we can make things work a lot better and hopefully safer for the young people and for the teachers and other folks in the schools.
Yet another aspect of technology, and we keep on seeing technology everywhere in our lives.
Right,
You know,
it is.
We talk about STEM fields, the science, technology, engineering and mathematics,
math,
right? One thing that I'd love to see us doing is placing a little more emphasis on getting girls, female students involved in the STEM fields, because it seems like they ignore the STEM fields to a certain extent, or not that they ignore them, but they really don't. The emphasis isn't there for girls as it is for boys. It seems there was a great commercial done on the Super Bowl. One of the Super Bowl commercials was about girls inventing things, and it showed a whole bunch of girls all over town pulling all their pink things out of the house, and they're assembling a rocket, and they assemble this rocket in a control station, and they push the plunger, and the rocket launches, and basically the message was girls can build things too. So it was pretty neat seeing that, and that's something that I'd like to see some
Well,
more
I'm sure
emphasis
we
placed on.
should be doing that for everybody, and if we've got a shortage of girls in that field, we should figure out why and
Figure out why
encourage more.
and try to give them some impetus, give them a push
Absolutely.
in the right direction. Some of the bills that you've worked on recently, you talk about the Good Samaritan bill, strengthening the sex offender registry law, and corporate manslaughter. Can you tell us a little bit about those bills?
Well, the Good Samaritan bill was that actually we found that if you're an EMT off duty, you don't always have the same protection that you do when you're on duty. As far as if you go to someone's aid and provide it. We have done that for doctors, but it has not been extended to
EMTs.
all the EMTs and all the folks that might respond if they're off duty, because it could affect their license. We do the same with nurses. that when they're off duty, many of them do come forward, but they do it at their own risk.
They do it at their own risk, yeah.
And so it's really
Now,
to protect them from lawsuit.
When I worked, I used to work in corporate America. Now I'm selling solar power, but I worked in corporate America for a long time, and I was a floor warden at the place where I worked. They got me CPR certification.
Yep.
Now, from what I understand, with the card that was in my wallet saying that I was certified to perform CPR, I was protected should I, let's say, break someone's ribs while compressing, while doing chest compressions or something along those lines. This was separate from that as an EMT.
Because you didn't have a license to do that. In the
I
sense
see.
You had a card saying you were certified, but it was not a professional license by which you get your employment.
Okay.
And the problem was that there was a risk of people who, of losing their actual livelihood, their job, for going to the aid of someone.
Okay, when they weren't on duty.
For doing things that they knew how to do and were trained to do and were certified as you were to do.
In a life-saving situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, many times that the courts threw out those cases as frivolous, but not always, and it's not. So it's not. You don't want to discourage someone who has the right training from stepping
helping.
in at that they're going to risk their house or their job or something
Right.
because of that. You want to encourage them to do it, make more people
Sure.
available. I mean,
Sure.
it'd be wonderful if everybody knew CPR and or more people at least
Right.
did things like that. But
I don't think I'm certified anymore. This was 6 years ago,
you
7
have to
years
keep
ago.
it up periodically.
Yeah, and I haven't kept it up, so it's not like it's something I'm going to just jump in and try. I suppose
Oh, the AEDs, the automatic external defibrillators, those machines now actually walk you through it. There's
Okay.
a voice in it. It's like the woman that talks to me in the car in GPS. When my wife isn't there, because otherwise she tells me how to drive. But
I hope she's watching tonight, so that
she's heard me say this anyway. I named the GPS Joanne. So, but there's a voice in the machine that
Sure.
really tells you what to do.
Okay.
And it will not shock somebody who isn't having a heart problem. If they're
Okay, so it senses.
if the heartbeat is normal, it senses that, and you can push the button, but it's not going to breathe the shock. But if it is, if they are in distress, it will work, and it takes you through the steps, and it tells you when to step back or not to be holding the patient when you're going to shock the patient,
Right,
and
right.
get the shock yourself.
Now, does your GPS, does she sound annoyed when she has to reroute?
Oh,
'Cause
yes.
Sometimes
Yeah.
mine goes, rerouting.
Well, I rode in with someone from Mendon who had a Mercedes into Boston one time, and I was telling them, well, don't take this exit, take the next one. And it said, a woman in a German accent said, "You must go back, you have taken the wrong way." Sounded like Sergeant Schultz, you know.
Okay, and where are we with the sex offender law?
Sex offender law, we have continued to increase the penalties for that largely for someone who's convicted of sexually related crimes. We continue, even though we've got laws on registration now, that some folks still fail to register, so we want to make it more strict that they
Sure,
get them to
increase the
register.
penalties for failure to register.
Yeah, so it's really tightening up on
Okay.
our existing process, but it's one that people are very legitimately very concerned
very
about.
concerned, yeah, certainly. So it's great to see you working on that. And corporate manslaughter, that's a big one.
Well, largely it came about is because of the problem we had with one of the drug manufacturers here in the state that they didn't manufacture. They weren't. First of all, they weren't supposed to be manufacturing drugs for resale like that. They were supposed to be designing drugs based on a specific prescription that a person got for the treatment, whatever the illness was. And they were going beyond their capability, and they weren't doing it under the cleanest circumstances.
Sure.
And as a result, a number of people, only a few I think in state, but mostly from other states, died as a result of the illness that they got. It affected their nervous system and their spinal column.
Yep.
And so it's because it was not done kind of willfully by an individual, which would have provoked a manslaughter charge. It gives us the ability to charge the officers of the company similar with a felony for manslaughter and with similar penalties. So that it is as if the corporation's officers, people who are responsible, are in fact doing what an individual could do if they kill somebody.
Yep.
It's manslaughter is not usually with intent,
Right.
as is murder.
Right. It's not premeditated. It's
Right.
not something they set out to do,
But
it's
it's
something
because
that
of their
happened.
because of their negligence, basically,
Right.
that it resulted in someone dying, and so it's really was to make it clear that to some degree, if the Supreme Court has said corporations can make donations to political campaigns, they ought to be subject to penalties too for violating other laws.
I've long said it. If we're going to have corporate personhood, we should have a corporate death penalty. Because there's another saying that says something along the lines, "I'll believe corporations are people when Texas executes one." So there's certainly a couple of ways to look at that.
Right.
Before we move on to the helping communities thrive, I wanted to talk a little bit about 2014 being an election year. It's a big year. We've got a lot of things going on. You're certainly looking for re-election here this year.
I'm going to be a candidate for another term in the Senate. I think that really over the course of my time there, I've put that service, the trust that people have put in me, to good use to help them.
Certainly.
To help individuals, to help communities. And I think that's really what it's about. It's I listen to what the concerns are, whether it's of an individual or of a group or community, and then try to find an effective solution to that particular concern. And I think having some experience in the legislature and have risen to a position of leadership and trust by my colleagues, I'm able to get things done pretty well if it can be done.
I have to say you're a very effective senator. I'm glad that you represent me on Beacon Hill. I'm proud to say that you're my senator.
Well, we've been able, through the office, been able to help a number of people with their concerns. Whether we had some serious issues with the computer for our unemployment compensation. Mm-hmm. People who had been unemployed. The system had switched to a computer rather than in-person kind of application for benefits, and it wasn't always going through. And then when they try to call somebody, there was nobody answering.
There's nobody to talk to. Yeah.
And so a number of people contacted my office, and we were able to get them connected and get their benefits going. And
great.
And these, folks that are unemployed, they're oftentimes living paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
And when those paychecks stop, there's not much resources to fall back on.
There's not much left. Yeah, you're basically a lot of people are one paycheck away from poverty, and that's a scary thing sometimes.
We're fortunately we were able to help a number of people that kind of got stuck in the bureaucratic maze that way, and we've done that again. The health connector, which was working well for a long time, as some of the resources got connected to our federal plan, the contractor who did that could have done a better job because they didn't.
These things happen, right?
And so people have been trying to renew their insurance, and they don't have an answer. So we've been trying to help with that too, to clean up that. And I think we're on top of it, working with the administration to try to get that fixed quickly so that it isn't a real impediment. But it can be very frustrating when
when you're in the middle of it,
sign up for something
certainly.
which they need, whether it's for their health or for their employment.
Yep.
They need that. They want to get answers, and I know I've been on the internet sometimes, and you get a website that isn't cooperating, and you get very frustrated.
Very frustrated. Yeah, if it doesn't come back in 10 seconds, where is it? Where is it?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, do you have any campaign events coming up towards your re-election? Anything that you want to alert our listeners to?
There are some coming up. The one that comes quickly to mind is on March 8th. We've got one at the Dudley General Legion Post in Sutton. A coffee, and it's a low budget fundraiser basically. Okay. We haven't set up the official kickoff yet, but there will be some, and we certainly let the Greater Blackstone Valley Dems know.
Absolutely, we'll post it on our website. Do you have a campaign website that you'd like to tell people
about?
Well,
it's moreforsenate.com is the campaign website, and then my regular website is senatormore.com.
Okay.
Which so people can
find you either way.
That, Yep. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter and all those great social media techniques, so people can follow me. Once they go through the website, they can get the connection.
Sure. Sure. The Greater Blackstone Valley Dems, we also have an event coming up in that second weekend in March. On March 9th, we're going to do a St. Patrick's Day breakfast down at the Progressive Club in Uxbridge. I understand that unfortunately you have a prior engagement already for that date.
Yeah, I've been, for several years now, I've been tasked to be the Master of Ceremonies at the Polish-American Veterans of Webster and Dudley's annual communion breakfast.
Okay.
And this is their 50th annual breakfast. And because Padding being the MC, I also have to get them their speaker for it. And so Secretary Nee, the Veterans Affairs Secretary, is going to come out, so I'm hosting that. But I will be represented at the breakfast at the Progressive Club too, so in one way or another.
Well, it sounds like we won't have anyone from that group at our breakfast, which is unfortunate. I don't think that we considered every other event.
They will be praying for you, though.
Okay. Okay. Another event that the Greater Blackstone Valley Dems have coming up, and we just scheduled this one today, so obviously I don't expect you to be able to say whether or not you'll be able to attend. On April 5th at 2 p.m. at the Milford Library, we're going to be doing a screening of Robert Reich's documentary, Inequality for All, which looks like an absolutely tremendous documentary, and I can't wait to see it.
I've heard something about it. I'm looking forward to it. I hope my schedule allows me to be there, because I would like to see it. And I've heard some very good reports about it.
Well, even more importantly than seeing it, we're going to have a discussion both before and after.
Excellent.
So we would love to have you there to participate in that discussion, and we'll see if we can put that together.
Right.
Obviously, I'll call your office and see if I can get your scheduler to make some room for us, because I think that'll be a great afternoon.
It sounds like it. I think it would be.
Yeah, I saw the trailer obviously online. It's easy enough to see the trailer. Go to YouTube, look for Inequality for All. But I also saw today on Vimeo a 4-minute clip from the movie. A man named Nick Hanauer, who he owns a pillow and down comforter manufacturing facility. And he talks about who the real job creators are in this country. He's a billionaire. This man has money. He has wherewithal. And he talks about who the job creators really are. And he says, I am not a job creator. When I hear someone say that rhetoric of I'm a job creator, he says, I know that they're lying, because this is who I am, and I am not a job creator. He says job creators are a well-paid middle class who can afford to buy my products. You know, he talks about, I might make $100 million in a year, but I only drive one car. I only can go out to dinner so many times.
You can usually only drive one car at a time anyway.
One at a time,
one home at a time, too.
But he says, he points it out. He says, I might make 1,000 times more than the average worker, but I can't buy 1,000 times more than that average worker. And it goes back to Henry Ford's days when he was making his Model T.
Well, and the economy in the last 10, 20 years, there are a number of millionaires that have been created in that period of time. But we still have had, the average person's wage has not gone up in the same proportion. So the gap has continued to grow, and I think that's one of the things that as a nation, certainly, and to the degree we can as a state, need to do what we can to address it. And some of it really comes back to education and things like that, but it is an area that you don't want to create a few rich people and a lot of poor people, because that
we return to the Gilded Age,
unrest.
and that's not going to be a good thing.
No, it wouldn't be.
It's not. It wouldn't be good for the country. So let's see what we can do to address that. But that movie, I think, is just going to be a great.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah. So anybody that's watching the show would like to go to gbvdems.org to take a look. We've got a couple of blog posts out there that talk about both of those events. You can purchase tickets for the breakfast at the website, or you can take a look at and sign up for the movie at the Milford Library. So we're looking forward to those. All right, back to your report. Helping communities thrive. Obviously, this is something very near and dear to your heart. You represent the 14 communities here in the Worcester Norfolk Senate District, and you represent them well. What are some of the stuff that's going on?
Well, back just to mention the Grafton-Upton Railroad again, for one thing, John Fernandez and I were able to get a state grant of $1 million to help restore the grade crossings for the railroad that through Hopedale and Milford, ones that the towns had paved over, and they would have been stuck with a bill to unpave them.
Sure.
So by getting the state through one of the economic development grants to fund that, that took a burden off the towns that legally they would have been required to pay for.
Okay.
But some of the other things we've done, we mentioned the AED trust fund, the defibrillators that we're going to be able to help communities acquire. One of the biggest ones is in the town of Webster, Hubbard Hospital, which is now an affiliate of Harrington Hospital in Southbridge, is in the process of upgrading their emergency department. It hasn't probably been upgraded I think the last time it had any real effort was like about 1950.
Okay.
Healthcare's changed a lot in that period of time. So there's not much in the way of privacy in the emergency department, and the facilities leave a lot to be desired. And so the hospital's been undertaking a fundraising. They have some donors who agreed to match money. So I was able to get $1.5 million in the budget as a grant to the hospital, actually through Webster Community to the hospital, which they've done, which has been matched, and so it's now worth $3 million.
Wow.
The hospital's been raised about 3/4 of what they need to do it. They've already started the construction. It'll be open and serving people, hopefully saving lives by next October.
Oh, that's terrific.
And that, I think, was a big help to the area. It benefits not only the Webster area, but communities throughout the area, plus people that drive on I-395 through Webster, and if there's an accident or something, they'll be able to get immediate help. We also were able to get help add money through one of the cost containment bills, healthcare cost containment bill of 2012, created a fund for raising health information technology grants for hospitals, and Milford Hospital got one about $500,000.
Nice.
Harrington also around the same amount of money, $500,000.
Yep.
And part of it, the theme behind those grants is to improve the hospital's connection with rehab facilities, some of the skilled nursing facilities in the area.
Okay.
So that when the patient is transferred from the hospital to rehab or to long-term care, if that's what's appropriate, their records basically will still be available to the healthcare provider there.
Okay.
And there's less likelihood then of mistakes in care delivery occurring.
Sure.
And that will improve the quality of care. Will actually keep the cost of care more reasonable than it has been when those mistakes occur. So that's a help. We've provided increased grants for school-based health centers, and we have a great one over at Blackstone Valley Vocational Technical School that has been developed over the last several years in cooperation with Milford Hospital, and that will help increase the support for that program that helps the students who are in school most of the time, and when doctors are available to do physicals or checkups or things like that. And that provides a very valuable source. I'd love to see more schools be able to move into that, because but we are seeing, and going to be seeing very shortly, in fact, near the studio, the Edward M. Kennedy Health Center out of Worcester is developing a satellite almost across the street from the studio.
Okay.
That will be open in the next several weeks to provide. It's a group of physician offices and people who might not have insurance, although we've reduced that number quite a bit. But folks that, if you don't really need to use the emergency department to get health care, we'd rather see you use either a physician office or this new health center that will be opening up. And the state has been helpful in supporting that effort, and I certainly have been involved in championing that cause as well.
Yeah, we like to see people stop using the emergency department. That's the most expensive form of care.
And it's oftentimes it's taking the docs who are trained for higher level stuff away from the people that they really need to help.
They really need to care for. Yeah.
And we shouldn't. The emergency room should not be the alternative to the doctor's office. But if you call for a doctor and it's 2 weeks, in Boston and area it's 60 days to get an appointment. Most people, especially if you don't feel well or your kids don't feel well, you're not going to wait.
Right, you don't want to wait that long.
And so they currently have been forced to take them to the emergency department. But by having a community health center, as this one is going to be, it ought to reduce the stress on for emergency care to more urgent care and more wellness and prevention that helps to keep the price down and the quality of care up.
Sure, that's great. There's a few other things that I saw out there. The Dudley Fire Station, what's going on with that?
Well, Dudley, the officials in Dudley came to me a few months ago and said that they have some schematics for renovating the station that goes back, it's a good 50 years old, and it needs to be renovated. One of the ladder trucks can't fit in it.
Oh, really?
And so it would help, especially in this kind of weather,
Sure.
to have that. But they didn't have the money in their budget and couldn't have enough flexibility to get the drawings for bid purposes. It's a much higher level of scale, architectural drawings that have to be done. And so I was able to get them a grant of $50,000 that will easily cover the cost of getting that ready for bid. And then they can go out and get the capital money. They found is sometimes easier than the money needed to acquire the capital money.
Sure, sure.
So it'll help on that regard. And then we've had at least 2 communities in the area that are either have celebrated or are celebrating anniversaries. The town of Oxford this past summer observed their 300th anniversary.
Wow.
And so we got them a grant of $10,000 to help defray some of the
Some
costs of that, and also to try to have some kind of legacy project to not just the party, but something meaningful.
Something meaningful, something permanent,
Right.
something to commemorate the event.
And then the town of Southbridge is about to celebrate in, I think it's going to be in 2016, so in a couple of years, their 200th anniversary. And so it was a grant of $20,000 to help them in their early planning stages to prepare for an effective memorial and kind of, again, to look at some kind of commemorative effort that lasts, that benefits the community. And these are things that are good because they'll bring people into the area. It's a minor version of tourism of sorts to be helpful.
Sure.
And I think and it certainly helps build community morale and support to have these celebrations. And
well, again, it goes to the history of this district. I mean,
Right.
it's really just tremendous the amount of history that's here. Massachusetts has such a rich history, and the Blackstone Valley in particular has great history.
where it all began, and so here, for the most part, between the Pilgrims and our Revolution,
Yeah.
and the Industrial Revolution on top of that.
I've often said that Massachusetts was leading this nation before it was a nation.
There's a lot of truth to that.
In a lot of regards, it certainly was, and we're still leading this country. We still lead the country forward, and our license plates say "Spirit of America," and they say that for a reason, because truly that's what Massachusetts is. I'm not a Massachusetts native. I was born and raised in Connecticut, but I'm very proud of my adopted state, and I've been here for 25 years.
Well, I'm
now.
glad we got you over the line.
Well, thank you. Yeah, dragged me kicking and screaming out of my native my native home. So, Senator Moore, it was wonderful having you here tonight. Did you have anything else that you'd like to expand on?
Well, just other than I hope people will feel free to call my office. Where they can get the numbers on the website, senatormoore.com, and if there are issues that they want me to get involved in, or sometimes people over this past weekend, I had been notified about a woman who was turning 100, and I went out and recognized her for her birthday, and so sometimes we get requests for help. We've had a lot in the Milford area, a lot of Eagle Scouts recently.
So I think we have to wrap up now.
All right.
So
It's good to talk to you.
Senator Moore, it was wonderful having you here. I really do appreciate your work for us on Beacon Hill, and it was just wonderful having you here tonight. So you've been watching All Politics is Local, a production of the Greater Blackstone Valley Democrats. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.